Welcome, Reanimated fans, to this week's episode. I'm H.A. Conrad here in Brooklyn, coming to you with my intrepid co-host Stuart Tiffin on California side of things. How are you today, Stuart?
Doing great. Yeah, welcome.
Woohoo! So we have some news items today, and then we're going to get into sort of the mid-season premiere of Fear the Walking Dead. And just big old spoiler alert here, because it doesn't air actually until tonight. We get the special extra early viewing because we're both AMC Plus members. But so just throwing it out there in case you haven't watched it yet, just wait to listen to this until you see it. And we'll put another spoiler alert, I think, in before we start our review. But so excited to talk about that with you, Stuart. But let's talk a little bit about COVID, where we are with the vaccination stuff. And the good news is that as of yesterday, this was like a one-day record, 4.6 million people got vaccinated, got a dose of the vaccine yesterday, which is a record. And that is very good news. Here in New York, the percentages of people vaccinated are going up tremendously. In my neighborhood, apparently over 50% of people here have gotten at least one dose, which is pretty significant. And the viral cases in my neighborhood are way down compared to the rest of the state. So that's probably indicative of the vaccination rate. And I think if everybody continues to do this, maybe we'll see some progress there. In the bad news category across the U.S., the rates of COVID positivity tests are going up, and also hospitalizations, and it especially is hitting younger adults, which is basically the part of the population that hasn't been vaccinated yet. So that's not good news. And then the other part is that the overall variant, or that is sort of predominant right now, is the B.11, which is the UK variant, and this is a more catchy, basically, and so they think that there's
just super contagious but not as fatal. Is that right?
I'm not sure about that, but I think part of what is feeding this, and this is just totally my own subjective thoughts on this, is that I think things have been lifting as we've been talking about, especially the weather's getting nicer. I think people are out and doing more things. And I also think that some people who are vaccinated are not necessarily taking the precautions that they probably should. Mask wearing is still very high in my neighborhood. People, I think, are still being careful. But again, we had to, go into Manhattan yesterday, and not quite as much mask wearing. So it's kind of clear why my neighborhood is doing a little bit better. And I think it's because both people are getting vaccinated, but also people are still adhering to all the precautions. So I think that you're not seeing that in other parts of the U.S. How is it in California at this point?
We locally we're tracking 4 different variants, I think, but only 1 or 2 cases with each. And that includes the so-called California variant, the UK, and then South African maybe. But they're not a major concern, other than in our ongoing efforts to get people to keep staying masked up and to prevent those spreads. It's because testing has gone down so much also with the onset of the vaccine and people not really caring anymore. It's harder to track the variants, Yeah. So they could be out there in the community, and they most certainly are, because they haven't been able to find real good contact tracing for how these people necessarily got these variants too. So that's kind of a bummer. The messaging is always oh, please go get tested, and people are I'm vaccinated. Why the hell did I get vaccinated if I still have to get tested for COVID? It's dumb. And so it's a tough battle to fight.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of that. So, but one of the things that has been kind of circulating in the news is that, especially as it relates to younger people, and it is that some of the universities are coming out with statements that they are going to require vaccinations. BU, Northeastern, Brown have all come out with statements, and BU especially, they have a pretty large international student population. And so one of the things and questions that have come up is whether they will accept other vaccinations other than, the ones that we know of in the US and in the UK, which are so basically, will they accept vaccination proof of anything other than Pfizer, Moderna, or Johnson and Johnson, which are the ones that are being used in the U.S. And they have said that yes, they will, though they haven't specifically said like whether they would accept, say, Sinovac or any which is the vaccine from China, I believe. And so I think that they're probably waiting to see if there's like more indication, but they may require that people have to get other, like, how do you do that? Do you require that they get another vaccine? I don't know. It's going to be an interesting thing to see. But look, hey, I think that the universities are correct in requiring this because as we've seen with other things, they require vaccination proof for lots of stuff. Like you have to provide all the normal vaccinations. So I think they're just saying that this is just one more, basically. So unusual, certainly, but I don't, I think that this is something we'll probably see from the majority of universities to try to help curb the spread. And, look, I think that college students want to get back on campus, and to be able to do that safely, I think you do have to require it. So, we'll see what happens.
It's going to be an interesting and very contentious issue as we move through this, just passports in general.
Right. So that will be interesting to see. I think that we have a couple of little news items.
The first one I'd like to bring up here is the fact that last week on Reanimated, I talked a lot about my incredulity that Laura was the first savior, and how glad I was to see her, and how it looked like just the ramifications of this. And I had not read I think it was like a side product that came out called Here's Negan that Kirkman put out, right? Like during the run of the comic.
Yeah, something like that.
I never read it, and that's kind of on that's like my bad. I feel like I stopped reading those comics around episode 100 and something.
I did not. I'll own up to the fact that I did not read it either. But
so I feel bad that I never read that. But in that, it was actually Dwight who was featured as his first like contact, who was also then in the future as savior. And so the show intended to use Austin Amello. I forget what his last name is, but they intended to use the actor who plays Dwight in the extended season 10 season, but then because of COVID and scheduling, they couldn't get him, and that's kind of sad. Although it also wouldn't have made a huge amount of sense given the way that they've developed that character for me with Sherry and Sherry's sister.
Yeah,
and he felt like, like when we run into him, when Daryl meets him in the woods, that version of Dwight is like this innocent in a way, right? I mean, he's got these ghosts of he's terrified of the saviors, and they've already run away from Negan.
Right.
But it doesn't really jive with me. And when we first meet Laura, well, she doesn't have a lot of dialogue, so we don't really get to know her, but she already seems kind of like a scary badass.
Yeah. And, you can kind of see tendencies where she's probably going to develop later, and she's just sort of like a take no prisoners kind of a person, and this is just what we have to do, taking care of business to survive. So I didn't mind them. Obviously I didn't know that that's what they altered, but I think that probably it was, and also it was nice to see her again, and I hope they maybe we get to see a little bit more of her story, so we get to bring her back again. So
there've been a few headlines suggesting that they could do a savior spinoff, but I don't know
about that.
What kind of legs that would have. We spent enough time with that group, frankly.
Yeah, I don't think we need to do that, but who knows. But anyway, I think that's, I think it made sense what they did, and I kind of liked the fact that they included her, so I have no issue with that. And next up, you found this thing about Invincible.
Well, shoot, I've been watching Invincible. Maybe
I haven't watched it yet. So
my goodness gravy! It's coming out once a week. It's not something you can binge yet. So I know that your MO is that you like to wait until they're all out and then watch them all. And I think that's probably a good take. This is Kirkman's new animated show based on the comic that he has put out about superheroes. It's on Amazon Prime, and it's really, really good. It's actually in like the top 10 of Rotten Tomatoes TV shows right now. And what the most notable thing that I wanted to at least bring up is the cast. It is an insane cast of actors.
Yep.
We already talked that Stephen Yeun was like the lead. He's Mark Grayson. He's kind of the hero, but it's a show about heroes. His mom is Sandra Oh. His dad is J.K. Simmons. Uh, you've got Walton Goggins is in this playing like a very important role. Jillian Jacobs, who is Britta from Community, is another superhero. Jason Mantzoukas, playing himself, as far as I can tell, with superpowers because he's hilarious. Is in it. You've got, I mean, there are Zachary Quinto has a pretty major role. Kari Payton. You have a huge amount of Walking Dead stars in this. Frankly, you've got Ross Marquand plays like 4 different people. Mark Hamill, Clancy Brown plays multiple characters.
I love the Clancy Brown. You know that.
Yeah, and if you're looking at the IMDb list for this, any of the characters with an ellipsis next to their name means that they play multiple characters. So J.K. Simmons is multiple people. Jillian Jacobs is Mantzoukas. It just goes on and on. Seth Rogen, Michael Dorn, Worf from Star Trek.
Yeah.
John Hamm, Nicole Byer from Nailed It, which I love that show. Lauren Cohan, Jeffrey Donovan, who was in that Extinction, I think it was called, that zombie movie we watched about the guys in the winter. It was pretty bad. Michael Cudlitz. It's a Jimon Hansu, who was like a Kree warrior, I think, in Guardians of the Galaxy, and he's been in other things. Sonequa Martin Green, Lenny James, Ezra Miller, The Flash. I have to stop because I could just keep reading names, but it is so much fun to watch this show and listen and be like, wait, I know who that is. Like Mahershala Ali is in the episode that came out this week, very centrally featured. And I don't know how they did it. Maybe it's just because of COVID and it was like easy to get people to go to a sound studio where they could be, distant and still be awesome.
Yeah.
But major props.
Well, look, I think that he's got a lot of people that buy into the stuff that he does. And I do think that may be much more successful because the COVID restrictions, especially with like voice work, it's so much easier to do that than obviously do live action stuff. So
yeah,
maybe people were just like, hey, this seems like a fun thing to do. But I think also it seems like a really fun project. So if you get to go and do this stuff with all these amazing people, I think probably worth it. And look, as we've seen, there's a lot of Hollywood that has slowed down or stopped in terms of productions. Like it's been like, yeah, things are starting to move along and they've been sort of limping along, but it definitely is not at the same level it was. So I think that's why you see so many actors doing all these crazy little weird, strange side projects or cameos and things you would never expect them in before. So
yeah.
But I'm okay with that. I'm definitely on board. So I think that this is like super, like just a positive thing. So, so I can't wait to watch it, but I am going to wait till things are more moving forward because I do personally like the bingey thing myself.
Yeah.
But
so there's 5 episodes out now, and I don't know how long the season's going to be, but I definitely give this 2 thumbs up beyond the cast to the story and to seeing Robert Kirkman kind of do his thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, cool. I look forward to it, and we can talk about this later maybe and possibly review it, even though it's not technically, related to our thing. But I don't mind it. And then not shockingly, the reviews in terms of The Walking Dead rebounded because of the Here's Negan season ender, which I don't think is shocking to anybody because he's such a fan favorite. And I do.
But so are Daryl and Carol. So like they hated 31%. I think it even went down a percentage point from the last time we talked about it.
Right, but there was also a Carol and Daryl episode earlier, so I think maybe that's part of why. And this one didn't actually show them together for the most part, so I think that that's part of the issue because people like Daryl and Carol together, they don't like them separately necessarily. So
there's more zombie killing action in Here's Negan, but that one definitely bounced back with 91%, I think, on Rotten Tomatoes. Even our pal over at Forbes thought it was good, saying it was the best one of the extended batch, maybe the best one in years.
Yeah. So that's, I love that episode. And I think the other part of it, though, is that Negan's story has, they've given us little like tantalizing little tiny details that, they then wove into this story for him. And I think that they did a really good job with showing a lot more of him. And I think people were excited to see that. So even just with the title, I think you would probably have fans tuning in, because it's Negan. But in any case, let's see what else. There was just a couple of silly things, not to get into it, but there was this like really weird listicle from Screen Rant about which Breaking Bad characters would most rating them most to least likely to survive a zombie apocalypse, which I thought was really strange.
Gotta say, I kind of agree with their choices.
I agree with
it's,
their choices.
It's a little surprising how far down the list Walter White is.
But yeah, like it's interesting. So so I thought that was just kind of an odd thing to throw in here. And I was like, oh, this is a strange thing to end up as a listicle, but okay. And then there was an article which I didn't see anything about this film anywhere, but I think maybe something to review later. As you know, like I kind of like some of these efforts in terms of like international zombie films, and this one is actually in Malaysia, I think. And had you heard about this film before? Because I hadn't really seen anything about it.
No, this feels pretty regional.
Yeah, it's basically called the translation is Fight for Life, Zombie Infection. And I'm probably destroying this pronunciation, but in Malaysian, this language, it's Belaban Hidup Infeksi Zombie. But apparently it's getting some accolades, though it's very low budget. So I think we've got to sort of manage our expectations in terms of this. But similar to like Blood Quantum, the director basically used a lot of locals, and it's an independent film that basically they really tried to use people who lived in the area, and the director is Malaysian Chinese, and his name is Ray Lee. And they basically had this whole, it's like a whole self-supported project. So I'm curious to see what it is. And they basically, they're dealing with a lot of the issues that are happening in their area, which is, and I guess the Maori TV show we watched also had some of, again, they used like locals and people from the tribes, and tried to have this like a pretty self-supported project, although this I think is obviously a smaller budget than that project because that was picked up by a network, and so this is getting some accolades. It was submitted to Singapore's like a film festival there, and then in a couple of other, I think St. Petersburg. So I think who knows how good it is, but it might be worth just to watch. And I always like to see different takes on this particular theme. So
I think this will be pretty bad, but it'll be interesting to watch. And I do see the parallels with the Deadlands, although I think the production level is going to be a little lower than that show.
Right. And so they were using a lot of members of the Iban tribe, and the director's wife is, I believe, a member of that tribe. So it's curious to see what it has to say. I like the accolades coming out right now, and I think definitely worth taking a peek at it. So we'll add this to the list for later. But it's kind of cool to see these little projects coming out, and I get really happy when I see these sort of self-starting projects getting accolades in different film festivals. And granted, like horror film festivals have a different thing, and they solidly rate this as like a B horror film. So I think, again, manage expectations. But I think it's kind of cool to see what people do, and especially it's interesting to see when you have like these when it's filmed in like certain areas, and just the kind of things that bring to it. Sort of like with Blood Quantum when they were filming on like tribal lands and things like that. I just think it's kind of a nice thing to see what that adds to the film. So let's see what happens with that. And then I think that was was there one more?
That's it.
Okay, cool.
That's it. We got all the way. That's a lot of news. So
Yep. All right.
We'll have to talk about the episode now. And before we do, need to warn you that there is a character death, a cast member death on, well, not cast member, a character death
Yeah.
in this episode of Fear the Walking Dead. So if you haven't seen it yet and you don't want it to be spoiled,
Listen to
stop.
this after. Yes. And let me just say, like, seriously, if you really don't like spoilers, this is the time to just pause and then listen later after you watch it. So all right. So with that big spoiler alert, let's jump in, and I can now say, like, this was a very hard episode for me to watch.
This is tough.
I'm still upset about it. So
And we should be. And it'll be interesting to find out, because it'll come out eventually, if Garrett Dillahunt was like, I've had it. I want to get off the show. He's done 3 seasons. Or if this was just something that organically Goldberg and Chambliss came up for with his character. His character
Right.
has always been a little too good, a little too nice for The Walking Dead.
Okay, so I will admit that sort of the turn that they took with his character, I thought that there might be some interesting things that they were going to do, and we've seen the fact that his morality and his view of the world has changed, and especially it changed once he joined Ginny's community, and the things that he saw, it really hurt his soul. And I thought we might see an adjustment there, and we have seen that mentally he was definitely in a bad way, and just couldn't take it anymore, and does what, I think most people would do, is that they go to what they know. And for him, his sort of place to hide out and place to I was hoping recover was his little cabin, and
when we left him, you were like, oh, and so he's going to go back to his cabin and just get his head right.
Yeah,
like,
that's what I was hoping.
That's the quote from H.A. Conrad from the last time we saw John on
That's what I was hoping. And I also thought, I'll admit that I thought that June would probably go after him there, so it took a slightly different turn than I was anticipating on that front.
Also, we go back to it was the second. It was 2 episodes ago in the show's chronology, when it was the Tanktown episode is when they split up at the end of that episode.
Right.
And you're like, why is June making this decision? She's choosing her quote unquote career over her relationship.
Well, not even her career, but she's throwing her lot in with somebody she knows that she can't trust, who she's seen.
That's very clear in this episode, because she's in jail, right?
Right.
It's like,
right.
oh, your
and
hospital
so
thing didn't really work out.
Knowing how all the things that June has gone through, and where she is with John, and who John is to her, I just, again, and this, this will be my big critique of this episode in general, or this storyline in general with June and John, is that this is the thing I dislike so much about, I think Angela Kang wouldn't do it with these characters if she was running the show. And this is my issue, is that you build up these characters, you set certain things with them, you take them on these journeys, and then suddenly you say, oh no, that's not how it is, just because you want the storyline to go a different way. And so that does bother me, because I don't believe that June wouldn't go after him. And I definitely don't believe that she would go and decide to set up these things with Ginny if she knew that John was suffering as much as he was. This is just something that, to me, is the antithesis of their relationship, and I don't believe it. And this I do find extraordinarily frustrating.
And insult to injury, we never even get to see this hospital that she has coerced Virginia into agreeing to let her run at the Tanktown episode, when she saves Virginia's life. You don't even get to see the reward that, in theory, Virginia was seriously intending to give her.
Right.
The only potential flash of that we get in this episode is June is very comfortable, kind of slapping Virginia around later at the cabin, even though she's been a prisoner. She's just kind of she and Virginia are alone. And I thought that scene was actually kind of hilarious. And I put that down to probably, oh God, what's the actor's name who plays Virginia?
Oh God, I just think of her as the one from.
It's Menifee, but Colby.
Yeah,
Menifee. I think she does a great job in still kind of holding on to her authority, but also being a little bit don't hurt me, don't slap me around anymore, June. You are a terrifying lady. So I'm hoping that they can develop that, I don't know, a little more. Because at the end of this episode, I'm also not sure how bad Virginia is as a baddie. She might be the better sibling. I'm not sure
Well, it's
anymore.
tough to know. Well, so we'll get into all of this, but that again, like with June, and I did like that scene between them because I did think it shows something. But again, this leads me to think, well, why would June have ended up in a jail cell anyway with this person? I just like putting to the cell by this person. I don't believe it. I just don't buy that this is how things would go. Not because of Ginny, but just because it just doesn't feel right. Like, and my biggest thing about why I really hate this particular storyline or hate what they did with it is because John Dory flat out told June, I'm in like a really bad way. Like
Hmm.
I am suffering. I don't know where I am, and I need to get away or I'm going to die. And it isn't even like that was a mystery, like he was suffering in silence. It was very clear that he was in a bad way.
Yeah.
Like he flat out says it to her, and she's going to be like, oh, now let's go and do this thing. We got to do this thing and build it. It'll be great. Like, I
I'm
don't
not
believe
looking
it.
forward to the self-recrimination that
Oh,
she's
yeah.
going to have to go through. And in the Andy Goldberg epilogue, he
Oh, yeah.
talks about how
Of
it's going to
course.
have ramifications for her character. I'm like, God, we just got past her like beating herself up for the death of her daughter
Right.
forever.
And
Now
now we
she's going
got
to be in the
this.
same situation because she uncharacteristically ignored her
Right.
spouse.
So this thing just to set the table on that. This is how I feel about that. So, and I agree. The minute I saw this happen, I was like, ugh, we're gonna have to go down that path again with June. Come on, this just seems to be like we're retreading some ground there.
I'm hoping maybe they'll find a new way to do it, or she'll just go into a rage place instead of that like,
Well, and we
oh,
already
I'm a bad group member. I'm always
well,
going to try to run away.
but we also know that she's kind of a badass, and I think she will be in a rage like revenge place. Absolutely.
Yeah,
But I do, so that criticism aside, I still love Garrett Dillahunt. I love John Dory.
he's great in this
I do
episode. Oh
think
my
that
gosh.
like if I disagree with what they did with June and John, he is acting totally characteristically of him, which is that, he went to his cabin, he's trying to figure out what to do, and he is in such a bad place that, he's basically trying to commit suicide, but yet it's kind of like this weird thing where he can't do it and he keeps taking out walkers,
Hmm.
which again, the gunfire is going to attract more and more, so I don't
Yeah.
necessarily agree with that part of it, but
Why doesn't he own a knife? Like I
yeah, it's
kept
just
asking myself this during this episode. He's like he's using his guns and he's awesome with guns, and I love the fact that he's so great with guns. But he keeps using them instead of a knife when he could use a knife. Even just to like when they kill the ranger later, he uses his pistol to do
right.
the headshot instead of just the stabby stab.
Right, it's
And
kind of
it's very
strange.
confusing to me. And I'm also like, oh, I forgot to talk about this in the news, but the whole timeline thing that happened during Here's
Yep.
Negan. The fandom wiki did update their timeline to add 2 years to the
Huh.
timeline, or at least a few hundred more days. I think it does basically equal out to 2 years, and they were. There's some interesting stuff in the notes there, but I'm on the timeline topic. I'm like, all right, so we are basically contemporaneous with The Walking Dead Prime. That show has been out of guns, maybe just because of the Savior War, but that show's been out of guns for at least a
Yeah.
season and a half, and
Yeah.
yet everybody seems to have guns and lots of ammo still in the Pioneer, the Key Club, whatever their name is, in this community and in this part of Texas. Maybe because it's Texas.
Maybe because it's Texas, who knows? And maybe because they've been able to scavenge more. But yeah, again, this whole group, everybody seems to have an inordinate amount of ammo. So I don't know. It's that's kind of a weird thing. Agree with you on that point. Actually, when this episode opened up with him in his cabin, I actually was really scared that he was going to be able to do the deed, and then that was going to be all sorts of weird stuff happening with this episode. So I am
What a
happy.
weird start to an episode. If
Yeah,
it's
like
just
I
like,
was just like, oh God, what are they gonna do? And then, and I will say they really played the audience pretty well in this episode because you're so relieved that he hasn't done this.
mhm.
But there is the threat of that kind of hanging over the head of everybody during this entire episode. Because even though he has not succeeded in doing this, and even though we see some glimmer of light, he
You
keeps
do and
basically
you
telling
don't.
he keeps telling everybody, "Hey, I'm just gonna help you." It's kind
And
of
then I'm gonna
like,
kill myself.
well, I was gonna say it's like the Dread Pirate Roberts of suicide here, sadly, or suicide threat, where he's just like, "All right, I'm gonna help you with this, but most likely I'll kill myself in the morning." So, and it's, and I'm not making light of suicide by any means. I just think that he's continuing to remind everybody of where his head is, which,
Yeah. And it's
again,
weird because every time Morgan like does a very persuasive speech to him where he's like, I'm only alive because of you, and we're gonna stay together and we're gonna work it out. And then the speech ends. I'm like, maybe he's changed his mind. And then next, one half a scene later, John's like, well, okay, once I get you guys on your way, I'm just gonna go take care of my thing. And it's
yeah, and
wow.
and the thing I do like about that though is because, like I don't know if you've ever dealt with depression or whatever, but people who are really suffering from depression or from this crisis of faith or have like mental health issues, there are so many things going on, and no matter like sometimes no matter what's going on, it's hard to drag yourself out of that hole. And I've definitely dealt with episodes at different points. I think everybody has, depending on what's going on. And I do think that is a really good, honestly, a pretty good portrayal of what it is like, so that, even though he's now been reunited with this friend who means so much to him, and that friend is reminding him of all of the things that are important to him, he's still finding that he's struggling. And, he is conveying to people that he is struggling. He's not just being quiet about it. So I actually did like that about this episode, where that he is very open about his struggle, and I do think that is, a realistic thing, where he is basically like, look, I am trying so hard, and he does have a lot of things that are going on with him. And the old John Dory, or the John Dory we initially met, would have put a lot of weight on the fact that it's Morgan that shows up, because he saved Morgan. So I do think that that's significant, that he is sort of, I wouldn't say brushing aside, but that he is basically still feeling the same way he is, despite the fact that Morgan has showed up. It just shows you like in what a very dark place he is, which is, it's hard to watch, but I feel like Garrett Dillahunt does a fantastic job at portraying that struggle.
Yeah,
So
and yeah, it's just that makes it all the more bittersweet, because you do see this silver lining of him not being able to go through with it, and his words might be saying one thing, but his actions say
right,
another, which is that he keeps not doing it. He keeps helping Morgan and Dakota,
right,
and in a parallel sort of. I don't know. I just thought that this was a real strong acting episode
yeah,
between Lenny James and Garrett Dillahunt and
right,
oh Lord, what's her name? The actor who plays
Dakota,
Dakota is Colette something.
yeah,
Coletti.
Coletti,
It's her. But so Lenny James though is doing an amazing job of acting his injury, because he shows up at the beginning
yep,
of this episode, or not quite the beginning, but once Garrett gets back to his old like haunt of that bait and tackle shop and gas station, and Morgan, his wound has opened up. It's been months. It's been maybe 7 months, because Grace is 7 months pregnant. I don't know how long maybe it's been. It's been multiple months though since the end of the last season, when he received that wound, and he's doing, it's opened up and he's having trouble with it, but like he has a lot of scenes in this episode where he is doing a great job of portraying just how crippling that injury is, and I
right.
kind of really enjoyed that performance today.
Yeah, no, and I think that it was good because his sort of level of injury does force John Dory to basically continue to play this role to help him, despite the other things that he's feeling. And it does, like, even if for a few moments yanks him out of his depression. And it forces him to interact with both of them. Like, no matter how he's feeling, he still has that John Dory sort of like prime directive, which is, I'm going to help people.
I'm gonna be a
So
good dude.
And so and I do like the fact because we've also seen Morgan in this place and in this dark place. So I do like the acting between these two and the connection between these two is very clear, and I enjoyed
Yeah,
that. And I
great.
thought that this was a great episode for that reason. And it's Zoe Colletti. That's who it.
Zoe
Yeah.
Colletti.
And
Let's talk a little bit about the scene ooh, where Virginia reveals to John and Morgan, well, to Morgan, that she has people in prison. And we have
yeah. So
in the cell, we've got, I wrote it all
everybody, we've
down.
got
It's not
everybody.
everybody. No,
Oh, no.
absolutely not everybody. This is my point. She's got Sarah, Wes, Daniel, June, Luciana, and Grace. Strand is standing outside the jail cell because he's the
Yep.
jailer. He's the
Yep.
cop. He's the bad.
Yep.
Not included in this are any of these new characters who we're
Nope.
supposed to care about from the convoy, the rabbi, the Tara, the lady who lived in the landmine house,
Yep.
any of the kids who showed up for half of this last season.
Yep.
Like, where are all these other people who we were supposed to care about? Wes is the only like new character, and he wasn't part of the convoy really, and he didn't really stick around with that group until the end of the season.
Right.
And so I'm like, how has she chosen this group of people? Or maybe Strand has, and he just knows that these are people that Morgan's going to care more about, even though they don't all get a chance to speak. In fact, none of them get a speaking role.
Except June.
Except June and Grace. And Grace only talks for like... so it was a little... I'm curious how this is going to keep going. I mean, in the promotional material for this season, there have been... there were headlines like, oh, Fear the Walking Dead's going to have its own season 6 type lineup of the Prime show.
Right.
So we'll see where that goes, but it is highly suspicious and weird, and an example of Chambliss and Goldberg's really patchy story running.
Yep.
That they're just like, okay, yeah, these 6 people are the ones, and none of these other dozens of characters that we made everybody like.
Well, I mean, look, I think that it could be their weird storytelling, certainly, but I think some of it may also be COVID restrictions. But
And yet there's a lot of people.
There are a lot of people. However, I also think that, one of the sort of criticisms or one of the things that we've seen is that, they expanded this sort of group of important characters so much that it is definitely hard for people to keep them straight. So I think we can assume that they just sort of narrowed it down a bit, and maybe those people will make an appearance later. But for the most part, I think we have to assume that Strand handpicked the people that Morgan would care about the most here. At least that's what I told myself in my head. Although I had all the same arguments that you're bringing up. I'm like, this is kind of weird that these are the only people that he picked.
And this cast definitely has needed some deaths for at least a season and a half, too. And that's something that we talked about last. We've been talking about on previous. Basically, it's like a Chambliss and Goldberg problem is that they kill off the wrong people, it seems like, and they do it in a stupid way. It wasn't that easy with Nick, I guess, because he wanted off the show, but the whole Madison Clark thing.
Oh God,
and there's still rumors of her coming back on the show.
God, I hope she comes back. That would be amazing because I love her.
It would be really weird, but yeah.
It would be weird, but I kind of like the idea of it. So I'm going to hold out. I'm going to hold the torch for that one. Hold the torch up. Hopefully it won't get extinguished.
She and June will just be best friends.
Yep. But in any case, I will say that the walkie-talkie crutch again, I was like, oh God, are we going to do this again? And let's again talk about how walkie-talkies don't have quite the range that everybody thinks. So you'd have to be like, they happen to work at the right points in time, at the key points, but not work at other points in time. And I was like, but at least they didn't go down that road too much in this. There was just a couple of moments. And again, it was just to set up, first of all, that they knew where John Dory is. Secondly, that there's a place, and Morgan uses this as a tool to basically kind of trap John Dory into, or force him to help them because he outs where his little cabin is. Again, he gives pretty vague instructions about where the cabin is. So it's like the fact that they're even able to find it. I mean, obviously they have June, but John Dory is like, oh man, you're such a jerk for outing my cabin hideout. And he,
Marcus found it, no problem.
Yeah, but it's just like, okay, whatever. But so there are some convenient things that they do here that I just don't think are super just wouldn't necessarily happen. But in any case, you do have the story between Morgan and John and Dakota, and John is committed to getting them to where they need to go. They, set up this whole thing where they fix up the car, and this brings in the storyline, and you hear a little bit more about John Dory and the struggle he had with his father and his father's abandonment of them, and how he feels like maybe he is his dad and reliving some of those same issues. And look, maybe that is a part of it, and it does seem like his dad maybe had some similar things happening in his head.
Well,
and
do you remember they brought this up in the first half of the season that his dad had planted evidence to get a guy convicted, and John was like, and that was the right way to do it, and I was like, nope, that does not check out.
Nope, it doesn't, and certainly doesn't check out with John either, right? So
it shouldn't have, but that was my point.
Yeah, no. And so there's things like that going on that are also sort of ruminating there, and inform how he's figuring out the rest of the episode, or how he's acting in the rest of the episode. And then you do have, and again, like these are the storytelling pieces that do drive me a little bit crazy, because you've got Morgan and John, who are probably some of the most seasoned zombie killers in this entire universe, in my opinion. They're right up there with like Michonne and others, and Daryl and all of that. And I don't think that their sort of plan to sort of have this weird ram thing go through this. There are not that many walkers on that bridge. There's enough that they could just sort of let them through and just easily kill them. I don't know that they need to do this with the truck. Were you bothered by that? Because I was super bothered by this whole thing, even though it said, and maybe it's because they couldn't really, again, because of COVID, maybe they weren't allowed to have that many zombie extras hanging out. But I don't buy that this is how that they would go about things, because it seems like kind of an ill-fated plan, no?
So, sorry, which is the part that you didn't like about this? Because I thought this scene was badass.
No, I thought the scene was badass, but like when they show sort of the number of walkers, they keep talking about a herd. It doesn't, I mean, yeah, it's like a significant number, but enough that I think they could probably have dispatched them. I know
not wounded Morgan.
Maybe you're right. Anyway, I just was like a little annoyed at it, because I just was just, it felt like an unnecessary thing. But again, I thought
my continuity issue with the scene is really just that Dakota tells John Dory that she learned to drive on her dad's 6-speed in the church parking lot on Sundays. If they are 12 years into the apocalypse, Zoe Colletti is 19 years old in real life. The actor is 19. Nobody really knows how old Dakota is. Mid to late teens is what people guess. She was like 9 years old or 7 years old at the very oldest.
Right. I had the same problem, and I'm like,
with her dad.
What were you driving exactly?
That's crazy to me. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was my only like real continuity issue.
I mean,
I feel like with this 12-year time lapse thing, they really all need to be on the same page with this, because I have a feeling that I'm not alone in trying to keep track of what's going on here.
It feels a little strange that they did that. And, I could see a dad putting his kid on his lap, but the kid's not going to be changing the gears,
There's tons of cars in their community. She could have just as easily said, oh, yeah, Ranger Joe lets me drive sometimes.
Right.
Like,
and this is the patchy storytelling piece where they're definitely trying to draw a paternal link between Dakota and John. Where they're bonding over this, they're both talking about their fathers, that kind of thing.
He's like giving her little pep talks as they're driving through the zombies. That's one of the things I loved about this scene. Like Morgan Lenny James is acting up his injuries so well, but still doing like kick-ass Morgan stuff. John is like everywhere, doing everything and being amazing. I loved the scene for all of that, and so it makes it all the more painful at the end of the scene, obviously.
Yeah. So I like the bonding between them. It's just, to me, these are little easy storytelling tweaks that they could have made. You're right, because I had the same.
This is what Scott Gimple's job is, isn't it?
Yeah,
like continuity,
and it's like
overarching story
and it's the
stuff.
It's the same reaction I had when she was telling the story. I was like, man, she must have been like 5 or 6 or something, like I was just like, this kid must have been so, like, this doesn't even make sense. Like, you could have even said that one of the Rangers sneakily helped her practice or something, or easy. That this was some weird thing that Ginny did with her, even, honestly. Like, I just think that was sort of an odd thing. But again, Garrett Dillahunt is just a phenomenal actor. I think she's a great actor too, and their bond and their interactions here were phenomenal. So despite the weird storytelling glitchiness, I think that this made sense to me, and I believed that they were bonding, and I believed that there was a connection there. And she saves him. And again, well, we'll
Yeah.
talk about this in a minute when we get to the really serious part of this whole episode. But there's a moment where he goes out to repair the car, and she basically saves him because she shoots a zombie, and she seems super scared to do it. Like, oh, I've never done this before. And if we go into the future, this is clearly not the case, or that she's got some things going on. So, where she has been somewhat of a chameleon, and she is a different person than she's been sort of that we've been seeing. And I think this was
Yeah.
this was somewhat artfully done, but I don't believe
Yeah.
she would have been shocked at being able to kill a zombie at this point,
And I
right?
think we need to go back and look at the other episodes that she's been in. She's always so sweet and, oh, you gotta watch out because somebody, Virginia's hiding something and I'll be here to help you. And oh, I'm just an eager kid.
Yep.
And maybe it is too artful in its execution when the big reveal that she is actually a multiple offender murderer at this
Yep.
point. Certainly by the end of this episode, she is. And her first, if it's her first kill against Cameron, was with a knife. She stabbed a dude.
Right.
Like,
So I just don't think she would have been that shocked that she killed off a walker, right? So
yeah.
even if you're being artful about it, I think it's kind of hard to mimic that. So I thought that was kind of odd. But, and I do think that they're trying to draw some similarities. Like, remember when we saw Charlie? Like, we got Charlie, and we saw that Charlie was being duplicitous, even much younger than this. And this was how she was introduced to the group. And I think that maybe, we've got some, I think that they are drawing some parallels. And then this is a very, very different character from Charlie. But
She's got way more in common with Lizzie, right,
Yep,
than
yep.
than Charlie. So I definitely was thinking in my head, Morgan, please tell her to look
Look
at
at
the
the flowers. The same thing. I was like, oh, this is not going to go a good way. And the other thing is that, we get to the point where she's basically, and I liked how all this was revealed. Earlier in the episode, she was asking about the sort of piece of evidence, and John Dory owns up to
John has just taken it with him to his cabin for
right.
some reason.
It's odd that she would have picked up. It's kind of a small thing, so it's but maybe somebody who was involved with it would have seen it. And then when the truth is revealed, it is good. Like the acting between them and the sort of betrayal on John's face and the hurt and the confusion is just he
reels it in so well.
Yeah.
Garrett Dillahunt's like, oh, what? You're the murderer? Oh, I've cracked the case. Oh, you're a bet. Wait, okay. Bring it back.
Yep.
I don't want to kill myself. You don't want to kill me. This is going to be
right.
fine. We're all
Like,
gonna
and he's
work
trying
together.
to reason
Maybe
with
you can
her.
be my
I
answer.
also, but again, here's the thing. John Dory is, yes, he ultimately is seeing the lining here. He's going to try to bring her in. I don't believe she would have been able to shoot him this easily. I just don't. And
her body language is really good in this scene where she kind of goes all like on her tiptoes and like bouncing back and forth. Like he needs to read that body language and be like, all right, this is fight or flight. She's not thinking like reason, I don't think. And I think that was actually a good piece of performance by Zoe Colletti there.
Yeah, no, and I think she was phenomenal. I just think that John Dory is so skilled, and even though he wants to see the good in people, he's really good at reading that body language, and I just don't...
But he's, at this point, he's also like willing to... He's not trying to die. He's not like trying to do suicide by criminal.
Yeah.
But he's also... There's no way he's gonna hold a gun on Dakota.
No.
Right? Like,
but I also don't
not
think
even an option for
I
him.
think he could have dodged it basically, or jumped over or something. I don't know. I'll as you know, I'm just trying to save the character even though it's already happened, but like but that's not what happens. She shoots him, and then we get this like horrible tragic thing where he basically is like, and there's this whole thing that his father had said, it's never too late, basically, and he finds that never too late sadly at the bottom of a river bed as he's like kind of bleeding out.
A little more on this wound that he's got.
Yeah, which
also after she shoots him, she like kind of calmly pushes him over the edge of the bridge to fall into the river. he has almost exactly the same wound that Morgan had.
Yep, and it's not in his chest. It's like a little. Well, I guess
Oh,
it is.
it is.
It is, but it's not like it's. Yeah, and I think that that's not a mistake. That he's got the same wound as Morgan, and
So
then
that's why we're like, oh, maybe he'll pull through.
I know, and he's on like a little board, and I mean, even at that point, I'm like, June's gonna have to find him on the riverbed. It just wasn't what I was hoping for. And then and then we have Morgan, and I was like, oh, is she gonna get away with this? I thought she was.
Right.
I thought she
Morgan
was.
walks up right as she's like lining up another shot on on
Poor John.
poor
Yeah,
John as he's floating downriver. And so I was really glad that she didn't get away with it, and Morgan didn't
yeah.
have to hear some BS story about how he finally killed himself on the bridge after their big
Well,
victory.
that's what I thought she was going to do. I also thought maybe she was going to say a walker bit him and she was forced to do something or whatever, but that's not what happens. And so Morgan quickly gets like the actually he gets the whole big reveal. He knows exactly what has happened here. And
Yeah.
at this point, I'm like, well, dude, why not just hand her over to her sister and wash her hands of it? And her sister's clearly been like protecting a little psychopath.
John Morgan has also kind of said during this episode, like maybe not all life is precious right now. So he's kind of also completely come away, and we knew this from his transformation earlier this season.
Right.
But he's come away from his philosophy that nonviolence is or non-fatal violence is his thing. He's like, yeah, maybe in the next life.
Yeah,
That
he's
was
like
kind of a
maybe
funny line.
he's like it's not what we wanted, but it'll still be good. But we have to like come to
Yeah.
some kind of understanding that we're gonna have to deal with these like bad situations and
And so I
like
was half expecting him to just take
yeah.
that shot, take care of it. She has killed his best friend. He just said in the last scene that he was in with John Dory, "You're my best friend, and I'm here to save you."
But he
She
also
has shot him.
she brings up very quickly that basically the only reason
Oh
that
God.
Grace and them are alive, and he knows it. And let's say I think we also have to save her comeuppance for June because I think that's clearly going to happen.
Yeah,
I
we'll
think it
see if
has to happen.
she goes Carol or a different direction. And the other major revelation, or at least speech, we get from Dakota is that she's the one who saved him and patched him up. I call bullshit
I
on this.
call
I don't
bullshit
think.
on that too. Yep, no
I think
way.
she knows enough about his little origin story, or second or third origin story, depending on if you're
Right.
keeping track. She knows enough about it. She's seen the note. She can memorize those words, and he doesn't know any of the details that he hasn't already blabbed out to everybody. So, I think that she is probably not the person who patched up Morgan. It's like I don't know. I don't remember how far it is from the gulch to the town that they live in. She would have needed a car, you know.
Yeah. I don't
So
buy.
I'm thinking
I
no.
think she knows enough. And again, he's blabbed to so many people about it. He's been with her on the road. She's had enough access to like. I just
Hmm.
think that yeah, I agree with you. I don't. I don't. There's no way that she's the one who patched him up. But again, I'm like, oh wow, they're making Dakota the big bad. In all of this, and suddenly Jenny seems kind of mild by comparison. And
Really?
but I will say that the and now we have Morgan trying to figure out what the heck he's going to do with his little Dexter, and or I guess not Dexter because Dexter has some weird ethical things, but with what he does. Although I guess you could argue that I think Dakota feels like she's got reasoning for doing this and basically
Nah,
saying,
she killed Cameron because he was inconveniencing her.
yeah,
I mean, and
agreed.
that's the thing that John Dora is like
I know.
incredulous with her about. He's like, wait, what?
Yeah, come on now. Yeah, exactly. And but so we leave that scene and then we go into the whole cabin thing where again, conveniently, walkie-talkie time. Morgan basically breaks the bad news and June is beside herself and everybody's looking for John Dory. And I will say that the sort of reveal when June finds him, they do tear at your heartstrings because you think that maybe he's still potentially alive. And then when the whole Walker reveal happens with John Dory, my heart broke into 1,000 pieces because I really just love Garrett Dillahunt and I didn't want him to leave the show.
Yeah.
And it's again, there's a symmetry here because he had found June there, so
Oh, yeah.
you
And
really want June to be able to save him, and
mhm.
for him who was her salvation to die in this manner. and to die like for no, honestly, there's really no good reason why he died here. And there, I do think that the cinematography here was amazing. The slow mo when he's like grabbing at her wrist, and
Jenna Elfman's facial expressions.
it was
Good Lord.
amazing. It was amazing and really heartbreaking. And then she does what she has to do, and she it's just awful though. Like it really is, and it like just a terrible thing. I do think that they're doing their best to honor the John Dory character and to just give him a fantastically dramatic exit, which they did. But
Andrew Goldberg, his epilogue again, like the Angela Kang style. First of all, do you notice that he keeps all of his booze in his fireplace for some reason?
Ian Goldberg, yeah. He's
Ian.
yeah, I think it's
I thought
Ian.
it was Ian Sham.
No, it's Andrew Chambliss and Ian Goldberg.
Son of a. Okay, sorry guys.
That's all good.
But he keeps all of his booze in his fireplace. But he also, his quote like from his epilogue is like, "No, he really could have helped out Dakota, but it just didn't work out."
I know, and I'm like, no,
I'm like,
dude, no.
That's not the right phrase to use there. That's what you say when like you're firing somebody, not necessarily when your potential protege has murdered you.
Yeah. And I mean, I was actually thinking, especially like after watching this ending, how hard it must have been for the cast, because my sense is that Garrett Dillahunt is a fantastically like nice person, aside from being an amazing actor, and he's definitely a fan favorite. But I think that he's worked with this cast for a while now, and he was such a great addition. And I think it must be really hard to say goodbye to this cast member. And I mean, I don't think Jenna Elfman's expressions were necessarily like acting, because I think it's probably a hard thing to say goodbye to such an important character when you're on a show like this. And especially one that's been such a big part of your character storyline. And so I am like a little bit worried. This character is truly like the heart of the show, and I don't know where you go from here. I don't know that there's any character that I like as much as the John Dory character on the show. Yeah. And so I am a little bit concerned about where we go and where the storyline is gonna go from here.
Well, luckily they can always just promote one of their extras with occasional dialogue, like the rabbi or anybody else from the caravan who we just haven't seen in several seasons, like in a season and a half, and be like, all right, now you are the moral compass of the group. Please step up.
But it's not just that though. It's like the Garrett Dillahunt sort of magic. I just don't know that you got that charisma. That simple, when he entered the scene. Everything, like, despite some of the storylines, things were so much improved when he was around. And while he was a little bit too Pollyanna sometimes, I do think that he added a depth to the show that was not there before, and was asking the questions in a non-annoying way about like where this is going to go. And so I'm really very, very sad to bid him adieu. That said, I think we at least get to see him in some zombie action in Army of the Dead at some point. So that's at least a nice thing. And I look forward to seeing, he's got like a few different film projects, I think, going on right now. So maybe that is also why he wanted to exit, because he seems to have a lot going on. And look, I think that this is, as we've said before, it's a really tough, like you kind of just have to be on the show. And so others who have tried to do other projects that have to take a hiatus. So maybe that's what was going on. I look forward to seeing Garrett Dillahunt in many, many other things, but I will certainly miss him from this storyline. Absolutely. So yeah,
here. That kind of leads us to the end of this episode. It was a really good one. So I will, props to the Chambliss and Goldberg, as much as I never give them credit, because season 3 and 4, or 4, I guess 4, 5, and 6. Not 3. 3 was okay. 3 was pretty good. But yeah, this was a good episode. It's kind of hard to say like how this show is going to proceed, because 8 is usually where the mid-season finale is. This is episode 8 of season 6, but it's the mid-season premiere, and so we'll see how the rest of the vibe goes. I think we're going to have a lot to unpack, obviously.
Yeah, we'll have a lot to unpack, and we'll have to see what happens. Oh, and I forgot, before we sort of go out, there was the one piece that we forgot to talk about, which is, in addition to the walkie-talking about John, Morgan has also alerted his little group, to tell them that he might be bringing the fight to them already. And again,
God, they're not ready.
Nobody's ready for anything here. So anyway, that is going to be an interesting thing to see. So I think we can see slightly where this is going to. I think the question is what you do with what do we do with Dakota is a good question. So I guess we'll see a little bit more how this plays out. But also, I'm going to miss Garrett Dillahunt. I really am. I'm so sad to see him go, and hopefully everybody else can pull up the slack. I do have some faith in Jenna Elfman. I think it's going to hopefully be a really good storyline versus a tired one, and we're going to see what happens here. But, I always like to see a lot more of her character too. So we'll see what happens with June. But yeah, this was a heartbreaker, but definitely a good episode worth watching. So I hope everybody enjoys it, and would love to hear what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, let us know. Get us on Twitter, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. And we'll have links to all the news and various things we've been talking about on our show notes at reanimatedpodcast.com. So for now, until next time, when we pick up again with Fear the Walking Dead, I will bid you adieu.
And ciao.